Have you ever walked into a room and felt the very air vibrate with unspoken hostility? It's not the temperature, not a draft, but something far more visceral, a chilling, pervasive sense of dread, of animosity so thick you can almost taste it. It crawls over your skin like invisible insects, making every hair on your arms stand on end, a primal warning of danger. That unnerving sensation, that suffocating wave of pure, concentrated hate, was my unwelcome companion on a crisp Tuesday morning in September. It hit me the moment my hand closed around the heavy, cold brass handle of Theodore Banks's imposing oak office door. I pushed the door open, the polished wood groaning a silent protest, and stepped into a scene meticulously arranged, yet utterly devoid of warmth. My mother, Vanessa Parker, was the first to register my presence. She sat ensconced in a butter-soft leather armchair, a piece of furniture that likely cost more than my entire year's rent in my humble apartment. Her black Chanel suit was a carefully curated statement. "Grieving widow's daughter-in-law," it screamed, despite the glaring fact that she'd barely exchanged a civil word with my grandfather in half a decade. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, unforgiving bun, and her face was a masterpiece of contrived sorrow. Every line, every subtle twitch, was designed to convey profound loss, yet her cold blue eyes betrayed the performance. They glinted with something else entirely, a predatory calculation that made my stomach churn. When those eyes, sharp as ice, finally landed on me, a thin, perfectly painted red smile curved her lips. "Madison," she purred, her voice a sickly sweet concoction that promised venom. "How unexpected. I didn't realize you'd been invited." Her tone dripped with a dismissive condescension, a familiar melody that had echoed through my childhood. It was a calculated jab, designed to make me feel small, irrelevant, and utterly out of place. And for a moment, it almost worked. Beside her sat my father, Gregory Parker. He looked older than I remembered, though 5 years of self-imposed estrangement can do that, can blur the edges of even the most vivid memories. The sharp lines around his dark eyes had deepened, etching new stories of stress and perhaps regret into his face. His salt and pepper hair, once a balanced mix, had now almost entirely surrendered to silver. He wore his usual uniform, an impeccably tailored navy suit, a power tie cinched tight at his throat, the very embodiment of the successful, unyielding patriarch he'd always been. He offered no smile, no flicker of recognition, just a hard, unwavering stare. His jaw was clenched, tight as a drum, as if my mere presence was a permanent stain on his pristine, carefully constructed world. Then, a calm, anchoring voice cut through the tension. "Miss Parker was specifically requested to attend." Theodore Banks, the lawyer, emerged from behind his massive mahogany desk. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s, with kind, warm brown eyes that held a surprising depth of understanding. His voice, steady and soothing, had a way of cutting through the chaos, making me feel, if only for a moment, less like I was drowning in the sea of my family's disdain. "Please, Madison," he continued, gesturing with a hand that seemed almost impossibly gentle, "take a seat." My gaze swept the room, desperately searching for a neutral refuge. The only empty chair, as if placed there with malicious intent, was situated squarely between my parents and my brother Bennett. Bennett Parker, at 28, was a living, breathing testament to our father's legacy: expensive suit, glittering watch, and an attitude of inherited entitlement that oozed from his every pore. He was sprawled in his leather chair, a caricature of ownership, as if the very air in the room belonged to him. His dark eyes flickered over me, a barely concealed flicker of disgust playing across his features. "Still shopping at thrift stores, I see," he muttered, his voice a low, derisive sneer. I instinctively glanced down at my simple black dress. It was from Target, actually, clean and pressed, perfectly appropriate for a will reading. But to Bennett, anything that didn't bear a designer label was, by definition, garbage. I didn't respond. There was no point. Engaging with him would only fuel the fire. I simply walked over, sat down in the empty chair, and folded my hands neatly in my lap. The leather of the chair felt cold against my legs, a stark contrast to the burning anxiety churning in my gut. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm so loud I was convinced everyone in the room could hear it, broadcasting my fear. 5 years. It had been 5 long, silent years since I had last seen these people. 5 years since they had thrown me out of their sprawling mansion, reducing my entire existence to a single suitcase, telling me in no uncertain terms that I was no longer their daughter. 5 years since I'd last felt the comforting, if illusory, warmth of belonging to a family. Yet even as their cold gazes pierced me, I found a small, unexpected comfort. On Theodore's desk, from within a simple silver frame, my grandfather's face smiled at me. Lawrence Montgomery, the only person in my entire family who had ever loved me for simply being me, for who I was, not for what I could do for them, not for the value I could bring to their carefully constructed empire. And now, he too was gone. "Shall we begin?" Theodore's calm voice once again cut through the suffocating silence. He opened a pristine blue folder on his desk, its contents holding the key to a future none of us could yet fathom. "We are here for the reading of the last will and testament of Lawrence Montgomery, who passed away on September 3rd. My mother, ever the performer, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed a distinct absence of tears. My father, rigid and unyielding, straightened his tie, a gesture of control. Bennett, leaning back, arms crossed, merely watched, a glint of eager expectation in his eyes. "Lawrence Montgomery was very specific about his final wishes," Theodore continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering on each of us for a beat. "He updated his will 6 months ago and had it witnessed and notarized according to all legal requirements. He was of completely sound mind and body when these changes were made." "Of course he was," my mother interjected quickly, her voice a sudden sharp chirp. "Lawrence was sharp as a tack right until the end. Such a brilliant man." I bit my tongue, a metallic taste blooming in my mouth. My mother hadn't visited my grandfather once during his entire final year. I knew this not from gossip, but from Grandpa Lawrence himself, during one of our clandestine meetings at that little diner on 5th Street. We'd sit in a worn booth, him buying me pancakes, listening intently as I spoke about my life, always pretending he wasn't one of the richest men in the state. Theodore's eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and in that brief exchange, something in his expression told me he knew the truth too. He saw through the performance. Theodore cleared his throat, his gaze returning to the document before him. "The estate consists of Montgomery Innovations, a technology company valued at approximately $4 billion. My mother's breathing quickened. My father leaned forward, his knuckles white. Bennett's eyes gleamed, a raw, avaricious hunger in their depths. "A real estate portfolio, including commercial and residential properties, valued at $1.2 billion. Stock portfolios and investments valued at $600 million. Personal property including vehicles, jewelry, art, and furnishings valued at approximately $100 million. And liquid assets of $100 million, total estate value approximately $6 billion. The numbers hung in the air, vast and dizzying, a gravitational force pulling at every greedy heart in the room. My mother's eyes were wide, glittering with anticipation. My father's breath hitched. Bennett looked ready to pounce. Then Theodore's voice dropped, each word a hammer blow. "To my daughter-in-law, Vanessa Parker, I leave the sum of $1. The room went silent. A sudden absolute void where once there was hungry expectation. You could have heard a pin drop. "To my son-in-law, Gregory Parker, I leave the sum of $1. My father's face, already dark with anger, seemed to curdle. A prominent vein began to throb ominously in his temple, a visible pulse of barely suppressed rage. "To my grandson, Bennett Parker, I leave the sum of $1. Bennett shot out of his chair, a strangled cry escaping his lips. "What? That's impossible! There must be a mistake!" "There is no mistake," Theodore said, his voice as calm and unyielding as granite. "Please sit down, Mr. Parker." "This is absurd!" My mother's voice rose, shrill and piercing, all pretense of grief having vanished like smoke. "Lawrence wouldn't do this. We're his family." "If you'll allow me to finish," Theodore's voice was firm, cutting through her hysteria. "To my granddaughter, Madison Elizabeth Parker, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. All properties, all investments, all assets, all personal effects, everything." The words slammed into me with the force of a speeding truck. Everything. $6 billion. My vision blurred, the meticulously furnished room tilting on its axis. My hands began to shake uncontrollably, a tremor starting deep within my core and radiating outwards. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Grandpa Lawrence had left me $6 billion. The magnitude of it was unfathomable. "This is fraud!" My father was on his feet now, his finger jabbing furiously toward Theodore, his face contorted in a mask of incandescent fury. "That girl manipulated him. She poisoned his mind against us." "I haven't spoken to him in 5 years," I whispered, the words barely a breath, lost in the maelstrom of their rage. No one heard me. Suddenly my mother's face transformed, snapping back into that terrible, saccharine smile as she turned to me. "Of course we'll manage it for her," she cooed, her eyes gleaming with renewed predatory intent. "You're so young, sweetheart. You don't know anything about running a business empire. Your father and I will take care of everything. We just need you to sign some papers giving us power of attorney." "Like hell she will," Theodore interjected, his voice fierce, cutting like a knife. I had never heard a lawyer sound so utterly, unequivocally ferocious. Madison is 23 years old and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Lawrence was very clear about that. "She's incompetent!" Bennett shouted, stepping forward, his face flushed with indignation. "She's been working as a waitress. She lives in some rat-infested apartment. She can't handle this." "There's also a letter," Theodore said quietly, pulling out a sealed envelope. His deliberate calmness was a stark contrast to the escalating fury in the room. Lawrence wanted this read aloud. My mother went pale, her carefully constructed composure fracturing. "That's not necessary. It's in the will." But Theodore had already broken the seal. He began to read. "To Madison, my beloved granddaughter, you are reading this because I am gone, and I am sorry I couldn't be there to see you become the amazing woman I always knew you would be. I leave you everything because you are the only person in this family who ever loved me for who I was, not for what I could give you. When your parents threw you out at 18 for refusing to marry a man 3 times your age, I wanted to bring you home, but I knew they would make your life hell, and I couldn't bear to see them break your spirit. So I watched from afar and helped when I could. And I was so proud of every single thing you accomplished on your own. You never asked me for money. You never asked me for anything. You just wanted to have pancakes with your old grandpa and tell me about your day. That's love. That's family. Everything I built for you. Use it well. Use it to help others the way I wish I could have helped you more openly. And to Gregory, Vanessa, and Bennett, you get $1 each because that's all you ever cared about anyway. Money. You threw away something precious when you threw away Madison, and I hope one day you realize what you lost, but I doubt you will. Signed, Lawrence Montgomery." The silence in the room was deafening, heavier than before, suffocating with the weight of revelation. Then my mother began to cry. Real tears this time, not the performative dabs with a tissue, but tears of pure, unadulterated rage streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "You little witch!" she hissed at me, her voice trembling with fury. "You manipulated him. You probably forged that letter." "The handwriting was authenticated," Theodore said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "And there's a video recording as well. If you'd like to contest this—" My father's hands were shaking, not with sadness, but with a raw, blistering fury. "This isn't over, Madison. We'll fight this. We'll take you to court. We'll prove he wasn't in his right mind. You won't see a penny of that money." "Yeah!" Bennett added, stepping toward me, his fists clenched, a menacing glint in his eyes. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours?" "It was never yours," I said quietly, my voice, to my own surprise, sounding stronger, more resolute than I felt. "It was his, and he chose what to do with it." My mother stood up, smoothing her skirt with an almost violent gesture, her face twisted with pure, venomous hate. "You're going to regret this, Madison. We're your parents. We'll drag you through hell. We'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative little gold digger you are." "This meeting is over," Theodore said, standing abruptly, his presence commanding a sudden hush. "Madison, please stay. The rest of you need to leave." My father leaned close to me as he passed, his words a venomous whisper meant only for my ears. "You're not my daughter. You never were." Something inside me cracked at those words, even though deep down I had known their truth for years. Bennett, in a final act of petulant rage, shoved his chair so hard it crashed to the ground. My mother shot me one last poisonous look, a silent promise of future torment, before her expensive heels clicked defiantly out of the room. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent office, a final, emphatic punctuation mark on a chapter of my life. I sat there, shaking, trying to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. I had just inherited $6 billion, and I had just declared war on my own family. It's strange, isn't it, how a single decision can redefine your entire existence? How the very act of saying no can tear down everything you thought you were, only to force you to build something entirely new, entirely your own? My journey to that lawyer's office, to that moment of inheriting an empire, didn't begin with greed or manipulation. It began 5 years earlier, with a desperate, frightened 18-year-old girl standing in the cavernous marble entryway of the Parker mansion, a single worn suitcase clutched in her trembling hand, tears streaming down her face. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," my mother had declared, her voice cold and sharp, devoid of any maternal concern. She stood at the top of the sweeping curved staircase in her silk robe, a queen surveying her realm, looking down at me as if I were something utterly repulsive, a stain she'd found on the bottom of her expensive shoe. "He's 45 years old, Mom," my voice had cracked, raw with unshed tears and disbelief. "I'm 18. He's older than Dad." The man in question, Richard Blackwell, was a business associate, a powerful figure my parents deemed suitable to merge our families and business interests. My protest felt futile, childish even, against the monolithic force of their ambition. "Richard Blackwell is a successful businessman," my father had stated, his voice flat, emotionless, from the doorway of his study. He held a glass of scotch, the amber liquid glinting, and he didn't even bother to look at me, his gaze fixed on some distant, more important point. This marriage would be extremely beneficial for our family's business interests. "So sell Bennett to him instead," I'd shouted, a desperate, illogical plea. My brother Bennett had appeared at the top of the stairs next to my mother, a sneer twisting his lips. He'd actually laughed. "Please, I'm actually worth something. You're just a pretty face, and not even that special." The words cut deep, a wound I would carry for years, but they weren't the deepest. Not yet. "We've given you everything," my mother said, her voice dropping to a glacial chill that promised consequences. "Private schools, dance lessons, a beautiful home, expensive clothes. We fed you and housed you for 18 years. And this is how you repay us? By refusing the one thing we've ever asked of you? You're asking me to marry someone I don't love." I couldn't believe we were even having this conversation. This was something out of history books, a relic of a bygone era, not real life in modern America, not in 2020. "Love," my father scoffed, a bitter, dismissive sound that echoed through the grand foyer. "You're such a child, Madison. Marriage isn't about love. It's about strategy, partnership, building something bigger than yourself." "Then you marry him!" The words were out before I could stop them. My father finally looked at me, and his eyes were empty, devoid of any parental affection, any recognition of me as his child. It was a blank, terrifying void. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave," he decreed, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, unyielding pronouncement. "If you walk out that door, you're no longer a Parker. We'll cut you off completely. No money, no family, no safety net. Is your childish notion of romance really worth that?" I looked up at my mother, silently begging her, pleading with my eyes to intervene, to be a mother for once, to offer some small comfort or protection. She merely turned and walked away, her silk robe whispering against the marble floor, a final, elegant dismissal. Bennett grinned, a triumphant, cruel smirk. "Better start packing, sis. Though I don't know where you'll go. It's not like you have any skills. You can't even balance a checkbook." The next hour was a blur of frantic, shaking hands. I threw clothes haphazardly into a suitcase, my laptop, my phone charger, a few cherished photos. That was it. Everything else, all the expensive possessions they had bought me over the years, I left behind. They felt tainted now, bought not out of love, but out of obligation, or worse, as an investment they expected to pay off. A chilling sense of liberation mingled with my terror. When I came back downstairs, my father was waiting, flanked by a burly security guard. "Your car keys," he demanded, holding out his hand. "What?" I stammered, confused. "The Mercedes, it's in my name, you're not taking it." With numb fingers, I pulled the keys from my pocket and dropped them into his palm. "Your credit cards." I handed those over too. "Your phone." "But I need—" "It's on our family plan. You're no longer family." I powered it off, the screen going dark like my future, and handed it to him, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "Where will I go?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "That's not my problem anymore." My father nodded to the security guard. "Please escort Miss Parker off the property." "Don't call me Miss Parker," I said, my voice breaking, a fragile defiance. "If I'm not family, don't use your name for me." My father's expression remained unchanged, a mask of cold indifference. "Fine. Please escort this young woman off the property. And Madison, don't come back. If you show up here again, we'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." The security guard, Jerry, a kind man who had worked for us for 10 years and used to sneak me cookies when I was little, looked visibly uncomfortable. He took my suitcase, his gaze downcast. "This way, miss," he said quietly. I walked out the front door of the only home I had ever known, the grand facade looming behind me like a mausoleum. The heavy wrought iron gates swung shut, clanging shut behind me with a terrible final sound that reverberated through my very bones. I stood on the sidewalk in the deepening darkness, cars rushing past on the busy street, their headlights blurring, utterly alone with nowhere to go and only $300 in my pocket, a birthday gift from the previous month. My phone was gone, my car was gone, my family was gone. Every tangible tether to my old life had been severed. I should have felt terrified, completely overwhelmed by despair. Instead, an odd, almost intoxicating sense of freedom began to bubble up from within me. The chains were off. I was truly, irrevocably on my own. I walked 6 blocks to a gas station, the biting night air doing little to numb the shock. I used their payphone, fumbling with the coins, to call the only person I thought might offer some shred of help. My best friend from high school, Tasha Williams. No, wait. I remembered I couldn't use that name, her proper name, Tasha Monroe. She'd graduated the year before and was working at a salon downtown. "Hello?" Her voice was confused, startled by the rare sound of her landline ringing. "Tasha, it's Madison. I need help." My voice was a raw, broken whisper. 30 minutes later, her beat-up Honda Civic pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the gloom. I had never been so happy to see anyone in my entire life. "Girl, what happened?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, as I practically threw my single suitcase into her back seat. I told her everything as we drove to her tiny apartment, about Richard Blackwell and his repulsive proposal, about my parents' cruel ultimatum, about being literally thrown out onto the street. "They can't do that!" Tasha exclaimed, horrified, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "You're 18! That's abuse! We should call someone!" "I'm legally an adult," I said tiredly, the exhaustion finally catching up to me, settling deep in my bones. "They don't owe me anything anymore, and honestly, I don't want anything from them. I'd rather sleep on the street than go back." "You are not sleeping on the street," Tasha declared, her voice firm and unwavering. "You're staying with me. My couch is lumpy, but it's yours for as long as you need." And then finally, I broke. The kind of deep, body-shaking sobs I'd been holding back all night racked my frame. I cried until my throat was raw, until my eyes were swollen shut. "Thank you," I whispered, the words barely audible. "That's what real family does," Tasha said firmly, pulling me into a fierce, comforting hug. "And those people, they're not family. Family doesn't treat you like property." In that moment, surrounded by her fierce loyalty, I felt the first glimmer of true belonging I'd experienced in years. Tasha, my chosen sister, showed me what genuine, unconditional love looked like. I lived on Tasha's famously lumpy couch for 2 months. It was a humbling, challenging period, but also one of profound growth. I got a job waiting tables at a bustling diner, the late shifts exhausting but necessary. I bought a cheap flip phone with a prepaid plan, a lifeline to my new, independent existence. I started taking classes at community college, securing student loans to fund my education. And I tried, with every fiber of my being, not to think about my old family. The pain was still too raw, the betrayal too deep. Then, 3 months after they threw me out, something strange, almost unbelievable happened. I was walking home from my diner shift, the scent of stale coffee and fried food clinging to my clothes, when I saw him. My grandfather, Lawrence Montgomery, sitting in his expensive car, discreetly parked outside my humble apartment building. He rolled down the window when he saw me, and his voice, when he spoke, was filled with an agonizing pain I hadn't known he possessed. "Madison," he said, and I saw a glimmer of desperation in his usually composed eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Grandpa?" I couldn't believe it. "What are you doing here?" "Can we talk, please, just for a few minutes?" I got into the passenger seat, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He drove us to a different diner across town, a quieter, less familiar place. We sat in a booth in the back, an oasis of privacy, and he ordered coffee and pancakes for both of us, even though it was already 8 at night. It was our ritual, a comforting echo of our shared past. "Your father told me you chose to leave," he began quietly, his voice heavy with sorrow, "that you wanted to be independent and you rejected their help. But I hired a private investigator, Madison, and I found out the truth." "You didn't have to do that," I whispered, a wave of emotion washing over me. "Yes, I did," he insisted, his old hands shaking slightly as he reached across the table to take mine, his grip surprisingly strong. "You're my granddaughter. I love you, and I'm ashamed of my own daughter-in-law and what she's done to you, of my son-in-law's cruelty, of Bennett's betrayal." "Then why didn't you stop them?" The words came out bitter, a lingering residue of the pain they had inflicted. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Because I'm a foolish old man who's been too weak for too long. Your parents control my company's board. If I had intervened directly, they would have had me declared mentally incompetent and taken control of everything. I wouldn't have been able to help you at all then. But I want to help you now. Please let me help you." "I don't want their money, Grandpa," I said, pulling my hand away. The thought of taking anything from that family, even indirectly, felt like a compromise, a defeat. "I can't take anything from that family." "It's not their money," he gently corrected, his sad smile touching my heart. "It's mine, and I want to give it to you." "I can't," I insisted, shaking my head. "If they find out you're helping me, they'll do exactly what you just said. They'll take everything from you." He smiled sadly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "You've always been too good for this family, Madison. Too kind, too brave." "I'm not brave," I confessed, the words raw with vulnerability. "I'm terrified all the time." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," he countered, his gaze unwavering. "It means you do what's right, even when you are." He then pulled out his wallet and tried to hand me a stack of cash. I pushed it back. "Please don't. I need to do this on my own. I need to prove to myself that I can survive without them." We sat in silence for a while, eating pancakes that tasted like cardboard because we were both too emotional to truly taste anything. "Can I at least see you sometimes?" Grandpa Lawrence asked finally, his voice small, vulnerable. "Can we have pancakes together every few weeks? Let me be your grandfather, even if I can't be anything else." I thought about saying no, about cutting ties with everyone in that family, even him. It would have been easier, cleaner, but I couldn't. "Okay," I whispered, a tear escaping. "Pancakes and Madison." "One day, things will be different," he promised, his eyes holding a depth of certainty that puzzled me. "One day, I'll make this right." I didn't know what he meant then, but 5 years later, sitting in Theodore Banks' office with $6 billion suddenly in my name, I finally, completely understood. My grandfather had been planning this all along. The first year after leaving my family was, without a doubt, the hardest. It wasn't just financially challenging. It was an emotional and mental gauntlet. I worked 3 relentless jobs. The breakfast shift at Rosie's Diner from 5 o'clock a.m. to 11 o'clock a.m., then an afternoon shift at a dusty old bookstore from noon to 5 o'clock p.m., and finally an evening shift cleaning offices from 6 o'clock p.m. to midnight. My body was in a constant state of rebellion. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, a fragmented, restless sleep that offered little reprieve. My diet consisted almost exclusively of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, cheap, filling, and utterly uninspiring. I wore the same 5 outfits on rotation until they had holes, symbols of my new reality. But despite the grinding exhaustion, the constant hunger, and the threadbare clothes, I felt a fierce, exhilarating sense of freedom. I was free from their control, their expectations, their suffocating world. That was worth more than any designer label. Tasha, bless her generous heart, let me stay on her lumpy couch for 6 months. Her unwavering support was a lifeline, a constant reminder that I wasn't truly alone. When I finally saved enough for my own place, I moved into a studio apartment in what could only be described as the worst part of town. It had bars on the windows, roaches in the walls that scuttled away at the flick of a light switch, a perpetually leaking toilet, and heat that barely worked even on the coldest nights. Sometimes, the distant sound of gunshots would puncture the silence, a stark reminder of my new, harsh reality. Yet, it was mine. The first night I slept there, lying on an air mattress I'd bought at a discount store, I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming triumph. I'd done it. I'd survived 6 months on my own, and I had my own space. Nobody could take it away from me. This little dilapidated apartment was a fortress of my own making, a testament to my burgeoning resilience. Community college was harder than I expected. My entire life, I'd attended fancy private schools where teachers practically wrote papers for you if your parents donated enough money. The academic world I knew was built on privilege, not performance. Now, I was in classes with people who actually earned their grades, who fought for every point, and I was shockingly, painfully behind. I failed my first math test, a brutal blow to my confidence. I got a C- on my first English essay, a subject I once loved. I almost gave up, the weight of it all threatening to crush me. But then, a beacon of hope appeared in my introduction to business class. Professor Janet Moore. She was a tiny, vibrant black woman in her 50s who wore colorful scarves and possessed a laugh that could fill the entire room, a sound so infectious it made even the most cynical student crack a smile. She noticed I was struggling. "Stay after class," she said one day, her voice surprisingly gentle. I braced myself, fully expecting a lecture, a warning about my poor performance. Instead, she offered to tutor me. "Why?" I asked, suspicion lacing my tone. "I can't pay you." She crossed her arms, her eyes twinkling. "Because you show up to every class, even though I know you're working 3 jobs. Because you take notes, even when you're falling asleep in your seat. Because you're trying. And that's more than half these kids do." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Also, because you're smarter than you think you are. Your fundamentals are weak, yes, but your ideas are strong. We just need to build you a better foundation." Professor Moore tutored me twice a week, completely free of charge. She taught me how to study, how to take tests, how to structure a proper essay. More than that, she taught me that I wasn't stupid. I'd just never been taught correctly. She saw potential where others, including myself, saw only struggle. By the end of my first year, I made the dean's list. I sent a photo of my grades to Tasha, who had been my rock, my unwavering supporter. Her text back was immediate, affirming, and brought a fresh wave of tears. "Told you that you were brilliant." My secret meetings with Grandpa Lawrence continued, a comforting, clandestine ritual. Once a month, we'd meet at a different diner in a different part of town, carefully chosen to avoid detection by my parents' prying eyes. He'd ask about my classes, my jobs, my new life. I'd tell him everything, carefully omitting the sheer brutal hardship of it all. I didn't want him to worry, but he knew anyway. "You look tired, Madison," he said during one of our meetings, his gaze filled with concern. "I'm fine," I'd insist, forcing a smile. "You're working yourself to death. Please let me help." "Grandpa, we've been through this," I'd sigh, my resolve firm. "I know you're stubborn. You get that from me," he'd say, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Your parents ask about you sometimes." My heart would jump, a flicker of hope, however misplaced. "They do?" "They ask if I've heard from you, if I know where you are. I tell them no, thank you." He paused, his hands tightening around his coffee mug, his expression hardening. "They don't ask because they miss you. They ask because they want to make sure you're suffering, that you've learned your lesson and you'll come crawling back." His voice was laced with a pain that wasn't entirely his own. "I hate that I'm related to such cruel people. You're not like them." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw honesty. "I raised your mother, or failed to raise her properly, which amounts to the same thing. I gave her too much money and not enough love. I was always working, building the company, trying to create an empire to pass down. I didn't realize I was creating monsters. You're a good person, Grandpa. I'm trying to be. Finally. Too late, but trying. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. I own a building downtown, small office spaces. I'm going to be renovating one of the units next month, and I'll need someone to manage the project. The pay is good, the hours are flexible. You could quit those other jobs. I stared at the card, a lifeline dangling before me. Grandpa, I can't. It's a legitimate job offer. You'd be working, earning it. No handouts. There are 10 other people I could hire, but you're qualified and you need it. That's not charity, that's opportunity. I wanted to say no, to maintain my fierce independence, to prove I could do everything entirely on my own. But the truth was I was utterly exhausted. I'd been running on fumes for months and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. The thought of a flexible schedule, of consistent sleep, was a siren song I couldn't resist. Okay, I whispered, the word a small, hopeful prayer. Thank you. The job changed everything. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the space it created in my life. I quit 2 of my 3 jobs, keeping only the weekend shift at the diner because I genuinely liked the people there, the camaraderie of shared struggle. The office management position paid twice what I'd been making at all 3 jobs combined. I finally had time to sleep, time to study, time to breathe. And most importantly, I had time to nurture the business idea that had been slowly germinating in my mind. I'd always loved making jewelry. When I was a kid, before everything in our family went sour, I used to spend hours in my room, lost in the creative process, crafting intricate necklaces and bracelets from beads and wire. After I left home, the luxury of supplies was unattainable, and the hobby had fallen by the wayside. But now, with a little extra money and a lot more mental space, I started again. I bought basic supplies from craft stores. I watched countless YouTube tutorials on my battered laptop, devouring every technique. I experimented with different designs, slowly, piece by painstaking piece, creating a small, unique collection. I opened an online store on a handmade goods website, calling it Madison Made, because my brain, dulled by years of stress, couldn't conjure anything more creative. I didn't expect anything to happen. It was a passion project, a creative outlet, a small testament to my spirit. But then, to my utter shock, someone bought a necklace. Then someone else bought earrings. Then someone commissioned a custom piece. Within 6 months, I was making almost as much from my fledgling jewelry business as I was from my regular job. It was a triumph, a small independent victory. What I didn't know, however, was the extent of my grandfather's quiet, powerful hand in my success. He had been secretly buying pieces under different names, a network of aliases carefully constructed to avoid suspicion. He'd been sending the links to his wealthy, influential friends, singing the praises of this talented young artist he'd discovered. He'd been subtly, meticulously building my customer base without me ever knowing. I only found out years later after he died, when Theodore showed me the receipts. Grandpa Lawrence had bought 47 pieces of jewelry over 3 years. He'd never worn any of them. They were women's jewelry after all. But he'd kept every single one, carefully stored in a special box in his closet. A small note nestled among them, in his familiar handwriting, read, "I couldn't help you openly, but I could do this. I'm so proud of you. Love, Grandpa." It was a secret act of love, a silent testament to his unwavering faith in me. By the time I turned 21, my life had completely transformed. I graduated from community college with honors, a feat I once thought impossible, and transferred to a 4-year university. I was taking business classes and art classes, learning how to turn my cherished hobby into a real, sustainable company. My jewelry business was thriving, bringing in a steady, reliable income. I'd moved to a better apartment, still small but blessedly free of roaches, and with a toilet that worked without fail. I was doing it, I was actually truly doing it. And through it all, Grandpa Lawrence was there. Not fixing my problems, not handing me money, but simply being there. Having pancakes with me once a month, listening, offering quiet wisdom, and telling me, with genuine pride in his eyes, that he was proud of me. "You're going to do something amazing with your life," he said during one of our last meetings, about 8 months before he died. Not because of money or connections or a family name, but because of who you are. You're special, Madison. Don't ever forget that. You're special too, Grandpa. He smiled, a wistful, distant look in his eyes. I'm an old man with regrets. But you're just getting started, and I can't wait to see what you build. He looked tired that day, more tired than usual. I asked if he was okay, and he waved me off with a familiar, gentle smile. Just old, sweetheart. Just old. 3 weeks later, the world stopped. He collapsed at his office. The doctor said it was a massive heart attack. He survived, but he was weak, frail, and needed round-the-clock care. I tried desperately to visit him in the hospital, but my parents, ever controlling, had him moved to a private facility and had my name placed on a banned visitors list. I never saw him again. The last text I got from him, sent from a nurse's phone, read, "I love you. Be strong. You're going to be okay." Better than okay, I made sure of it. I didn't understand what he meant then, not until 3 months later when he died and Theodore Banks called me to come to the will reading. Not until I learned that every single thing my grandfather had built, every penny he'd earned, every piece of property he'd owned, was now mine. He'd been planning it all along, and he'd been preparing me to handle it by making me build something for myself first. The news of my grandfather's death reached me not through a phone call from a grieving family member, but through a cold, impersonal news notification on my phone. I was in my apartment, meticulously restocking jewelry supplies, a familiar comfort in my independent life, when my phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Tech billionaire Lawrence Montgomery passes away at age 76. I dropped the box of beads I was holding. They scattered across the floor like tiny, shimmering tears, glass pieces bouncing and rolling everywhere, a chaotic glitter against the worn linoleum. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at my phone screen, reading the same heartbreaking sentence over and over. Lawrence Montgomery passes away. My grandfather was dead. The article didn't say much, just the sterile facts. That he'd passed peacefully in his sleep at a private care facility, that he was survived by family members who declined to comment, that he built Montgomery Innovations from nothing and turned it into a $4 billion empire. It didn't say that he used to take his granddaughter out for pancakes and listen to her dreams. It didn't say that he'd secretly helped her survive when her own family threw her away. It didn't say that he was kind and funny, or that he was the only person who'd ever loved me unconditionally. The world knew the billionaire. I knew the grandpa who loved me. I called the care facility, but they wouldn't give me any information, citing privacy. I called Theodore Banks, the family lawyer whose name I remembered from years ago, but his office said he was handling funeral arrangements and wasn't taking calls. In a moment of desperation, a primal yearning for connection, I called my old phone number, my parents' house, even though I'd promised myself I never would. Bennett answered. "Hello?" My voice came out broken, raw with grief. "It's Madison. I just heard about Grandpa. When's the funeral? Where?" He laughed. Actually, genuinely laughed, a sound devoid of empathy, chilling in its cruelty. "You've got some nerve calling here. He's my grandfather. I have a right to say goodbye. You lost all your rights when you walked out 5 years ago. The funeral is family only, and you're not family. Don't bother showing up. Security has your photo. They'll remove you." The line went dead with a harsh click. I stood there, my phone still clutched in my shaking hand, rage and grief battling for dominance inside my chest. They weren't going to tell me when the funeral was. They were going to bury my grandfather, the only true family I had left, and they weren't even going to let me know where or when. The injustice of it was a physical ache. I spent the next 2 hours calling every funeral home in the city, an endless, monotonous litany of questions, each no a fresh stab of pain. Finally, I found the right one. The receptionist wasn't supposed to give out information about private services, but when I started crying on the phone, a raw, uncontrollable torrent of tears, and explained that I was his granddaughter, who'd been cut off from the family, she took pity on me. "Oak Hill Cemetery," she whispered, her voice laced with empathy. "Thursday at 2. I'm so sorry for your loss, honey." Thursday. That gave me 2 days. 2 days to prepare myself to face the family that hated me. 2 days to figure out how to say goodbye to the only person who'd ever really been on my side. I didn't sleep Wednesday night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my humble apartment, the silence amplifying every memory. I replayed every pancake breakfast, every quiet conversation, every piece of advice Grandpa Lawrence had ever given me. "Be brave," he'd said once. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right, even when you are." So I would be brave even if it killed me. I had to honor him. Thursday afternoon, I put on my only black dress, the same one I'd wear to the will reading a week later, though I didn't know that yet. I pulled my hair back into a simple ponytail. I didn't own any fancy jewelry, except for the pieces I'd made myself. So I wore a simple necklace I'd created using my grandfather's favorite color, a deep, comforting blue. I took 3 buses to Oak Hill Cemetery because I didn't have a car, the city bus rumbling through the gray, wet streets. It was raining, of course, a fitting backdrop for such a somber day. The funeral was already in progress when I arrived. I could see the crowd, a huddle of dark figures gathered under a large white tent near the top of a hill. Expensive cars lined the narrow cemetery road, their polished surfaces reflecting the gloomy sky. Men in black suits held large umbrellas over well-dressed people I didn't recognize, faces I'd never seen at family gatherings. I stood at the bottom of the hill in the pouring rain, without an umbrella, just watching. I could make out my mother near the front, dabbing at her eyes with a delicate handkerchief, a picture of performative grief. My father stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, looking appropriately somber. Bennett stood on her other side, discreetly checking his phone, utterly disengaged. They looked like a perfect, grieving family, a tableau of respectable sorrow. I wanted to scream. I started walking up the hill, my shoes squishing on the wet grass, each step a defiant act. A security guard in a bright yellow rain jacket stopped me halfway. "Excuse me, miss. This is a private service. I'll need to see your invitation." "I'm his granddaughter." "Name?" "Madison Parker." He looked down at a paper on his clipboard, then back up at me, and I saw a flicker of something like pity in his eyes. "I'm sorry, miss. You're not on the list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Please." My voice broke, a raw plea. "I just want to say goodbye. I won't cause any trouble. I'll stand in the back. Nobody will even know I'm here. I have my orders. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to escort you out." Tears mixed with rain on my face, blurring my vision. He was my grandfather. I loved him. "I'm sorry." He reached for my arm, a gesture meant to guide me away, and that's when I heard a voice I didn't recognize, calm and authoritative. "Wait." A man in his 60s, with kind eyes that I immediately recognized, walked down the hill toward us. He wore an expensive suit and carried a large black umbrella, which he held over his head with a quiet dignity. "I'm Theodore Banks, the family attorney. Let her through." "Sir, she's on the banned list," the security guard protested. "I'm aware. Let her through anyway, or you'll be looking for new employment." The threat was delivered with such quiet power, such unwavering conviction, that the security guard immediately stepped aside, looking thoroughly uncomfortable. Theodore held his umbrella over both of us, offering a small, unexpected shelter from the rain. "You must be Madison. How did you know?" "Your grandfather described you perfectly," he said, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Said you were the most beautiful soul he'd ever known, and that I'd recognize you by the kindness in your eyes. He also said you were stubborn, and you'd probably show up even if they tried to keep you away." "I'm sorry. I don't want to cause problems. "You have every right to be here," Theodore interrupted, his voice firm, unwavering. "More right than most of these people." He gestured toward the tent. "Come, stand with me in the back. If anyone objects, they'll have to go through me first." We walked up the hill together, Theodore's presence a shield against the hostile gazes. I saw the exact moment my mother noticed me. Her face, a mask of fake grief, transformed into real, unbridled rage in an instant. She grabbed my father's arm and pointed at me, her mouth opening to speak. My father's jaw clenched, but Theodore met his gaze with a look that could freeze fire, a silent warning that brokered no argument. Nobody said anything. The unspoken tension in the air was palpable, but under Theodore's formidable gaze, they were silenced. I stood in the back of the tent, rain dripping off the edges onto my discount shoes, and listened to a minister who had probably never met my grandfather drone on about what a great man he was. Then my father gave a eulogy, a carefully constructed speech about what a brilliant businessman Lawrence Montgomery had been, and how he had built an empire that would live on through his family. I wanted to throw up. Bennett spoke next, some rehearsed speech about how Grandpa had taught him the value of hard work and dedication. My grandfather had barely spoken to Bennett in the last 5 years. My mother didn't speak. She just cried loudly into her handkerchief, making sure everyone could see how devastated she was. It was all a performance, all fake. Nobody talked about the real Lawrence Montgomery, the man who loved pancakes and bad jokes, the man who bought 47 pieces of jewelry from his granddaughter's online store just to help her succeed, the man who met me in secret diners because he knew his own family would punish me if they found out he was helping me. When the service ended, people started filing past the casket to pay their respects. I waited until almost everyone had gone, until only a few stragglers remained, hushed and respectful. Then I walked up alone. The casket was beautiful, dark wood with polished brass handles, adorned with a spray of elegant white roses. But I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to see him one more time, except the casket was closed. I pressed my hand against the smooth, cold wood and closed my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, the words choked with emotion. "For everything, for believing in me when nobody else did, for teaching me that I was worth something, for being my family when I didn't have one. I love you, Grandpa. I'll make you proud. I promise." Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, sharp and cold. "Get her out of here." I opened my eyes and saw security guards approaching. Theodore, quick as lightning, stepped between us. "Touch her and I'll sue you personally for assault." "This is our family event," my father asserted, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "She has no right to be here." "She has every right." Theodore's voice could have cut glass, each word a precise surgical strike. "And if you continue to harass her, I'll make sure everyone here knows exactly why Lawrence Montgomery removed you from his will and left everything to Madison." The crowd, which had started to murmur, went completely silent. My mother's face turned white, a stark contrast to her vibrant red lipstick. "What?" "The will reading is scheduled for Tuesday," Theodore said calmly, his gaze sweeping over my stunned family. "Madison has been formally invited. The rest of you will learn your fate then. Until that time, I suggest you leave her alone." I could see my father's mind working furiously, trying to figure out what Theodore meant, trying to calculate how much of the estate he was getting. He had no idea. None of them did. Theodore offered me his arm. "Come, Madison, let me drive you home." I took one last look at my grandfather's casket, a silent promise to his memory, then walked down the hill with Theodore, leaving my family staring at us in confused, infuriated silence. The rain was starting to clear. Somewhere beyond the clouds, a sliver of sunlight was breaking through, a hopeful sign in the aftermath of the storm. The days between the funeral and the will reading passed in a strange state of numb confusion. Theodore Banks had simply told me to come to his office on Tuesday at 10 o'clock a.m., refusing to reveal anything else over the phone, just that it was important, and I should be there. I assumed my grandfather had left me something small, perhaps some cherished piece of jewelry or a modest sum of money to help with school. I never imagined, not in my wildest dreams, that he would leave me everything. The thought was too monumental, too impossible to conceive. Tuesday morning, I put on my simple black dress again. It was still the nicest thing I owned. I took 2 buses downtown, the familiar rumble of the engine a small comfort amidst my swirling anxieties, and walked 3 blocks to Theodore's office building, a towering structure of glass and steel that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. The elevator had mirrors on every wall, reflecting my image back at me. Tired eyes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a dress from Target, and shoes from a discount store. I looked at myself and wondered what on earth I was doing there, who I was in this grand, intimidating world. The receptionist on the 15th floor, a woman with a kind smile, greeted me warmly. "You must be Miss Parker. Mr. Banks is expecting you. Conference room B, down the hall on your right." My hands were shaking as I walked down the hallway, and that's when I saw them through the glass walls of the conference room. My mother, my father, Bennett, all sitting there in their expensive clothes, looking like they owned the world, utterly oblivious to the storm that was about to break. That was the moment I had walked in, the moment everything changed. Now, sitting in Theodore's office after my family had stormed out in a whirlwind of fury, I tried desperately to make my brain work. $6 billion. The number didn't make sense. It was too big, too impossible, too abstract to grasp. "I don't understand," I whispered, the words barely audible. Theodore sat down across from me, his expression calm and steady. "Your grandfather spent the last year of his life planning this very carefully. He knew your parents would contest the will, so he documented everything. Medical evaluations proving his sound mind, statements from his doctors, video recordings. He left nothing to chance." "Why?" I asked, looking him directly in the eye, seeking an answer to the unanswerable. "Why give me everything?" "Because he loved you," Theodore replied, his voice soft but firm. "And because he saw what I saw the day you showed up at his funeral in the rain, uninvited and grieving, while your family performed for the cameras. He knew who you really were." Theodore opened another folder, its contents hinting at the complexity of the task ahead. "There's a lot we need to discuss. The estate is complex, but first I need to show you something." He pulled out a tablet and pressed play on a video. My grandfather's face appeared on the screen, and I stopped breathing, my heart clenching in my chest. He looked older than I remembered, sitting in what looked like his home office. His white hair was thinner, his face etched with more lines, but his eyes were sharp, clear, and full of that familiar warmth. "Hello, Madison," he said, and his voice, though recorded, cracked my heart open. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I wanted more time with you, but we don't always get what we want." Tears poured down my face, hot and fast. "I'm sure Theodore has already read you the will, and I'm sure your parents are furious. They deserve to be furious after what they did to you, what they've been doing to you for 5 years, while I watched and felt helpless." He leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk, his gaze intense, direct. "I'm leaving you everything, Madison, because you're the only person in my family who deserves it. Not because you asked for it, not because you manipulated me, but because you're good. You're kind. You're brave. You built something from nothing without any help from anyone, and you did it with grace and dignity and a strength that I admire more than you'll ever know." His eyes got wet, a glistening sheen of emotion. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you more openly. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home. I'm sorry I let your parents throw you away like garbage. Those are my biggest regrets. But I'm not sorry for this. I'm not sorry for giving you the tools to build something amazing, to help people who need it the way you needed it, to create a legacy that's about more than money." He smiled, that familiar, gentle smile I'd missed so much, a sudden warmth filling the screen. "They're going to fight you. Your parents, Bennett, probably other people too. They're going to say you manipulated me, that I was senile, that you don't deserve this. Don't listen to them. You deserve every penny. You've earned it by being a good person in a family full of bad ones." His expression grew serious, resolute. "Theodore has instructions about everything. Documents you'll need, evidence to protect you. Use it. Fight for what's yours. Don't let them bully you into giving up. And Madison, live your life. Really live it. Don't let this money change who you are. Stay kind. Stay brave. Stay you." He pressed his hand to his chest, right over his heart, a profound gesture of love. "I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I'm so sorry I have to leave you to face this alone. But you're strong enough. I know you are. You've always been strong enough." The video ended, and I sat there, sobbing, unable to speak, the weight of his love and foresight almost unbearable. Theodore handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently while I cried, offering a silent, comforting presence. "He recorded that 6 months before he died," Theodore said quietly. "He knew he didn't have much time left. His heart was failing. He wanted to make sure you knew why he was doing this." "I don't know if I can handle this," I whispered, wiping my eyes. "I don't know anything about running a company. I barely graduated from community college. They're right. I'm just a waitress who makes jewelry." "You're so much more than that," Theodore countered gently. "And you don't have to do everything alone. Montgomery Innovations has an excellent leadership team. Your role, at least initially, will be as majority shareholder and board chair. You'll learn. Your grandfather had faith in you, and so do I." "What about my parents? What will they do?" I asked, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over me. Theodore's expression darkened. They've already called me 3 times since they left. They're threatening to file a lawsuit. They'll claim your grandfather was incompetent. They'll try to drag this through court for years if they can. My stomach dropped. Will they win? No. Your grandfather's documentation is airtight. I've been practicing law for 35 years, and I've never seen a will this thoroughly prepared. But the process will be ugly. They'll say terrible things about you in court and in the media. They'll try to destroy your reputation. You need to be prepared for that. I thought about my mother's final words as she left, the venomous promise, "We'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative little gold digger you are." Can they freeze the assets? Keep me from accessing anything? They can try. They'll probably file for a temporary injunction while the case is pending. That means you might not be able to touch any of the money or make any decisions about the company for several months. But you'll still have your job, your jewelry business, your life. You've survived worse. He was right. I had survived worse. I'd survived being thrown out at 18 with nothing. I'd survived 3 jobs and almost no sleep. I'd survived roaches and distant gunshots and ramen for dinner every night. I could survive this. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice gaining strength. Theodore smiled, a rare, genuine expression of warmth. First, get a lawyer. I can recommend several excellent attorneys who specialize in estate litigation. Second, keep living your life as normally as possible. Don't talk to the press. Don't respond to your family's accusations. Let your lawyers handle it. Third, trust the process. This will take time, but you will win. What if I don't want to fight? I ventured, a fleeting thought of surrender. What if I just give them some of the money to make them go away? Don't! Theodore's voice was sharp, cutting through any lingering doubt. Your grandfather specifically forbade any settlements. He included a clause in the will that says if you give them even 1 penny beyond what he left them, the entire estate goes to charity instead. He wanted to make sure they couldn't bully you into surrendering. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa Lawrence was protecting me. Okay, I said, straightening my shoulders, a newfound resolve solidifying within me. Tell me what to do. Tell me everything I need to know. We spent the next 3 hours going through documents, a dizzying array of legal and financial complexities. Theodore explained the intricate structure of the estate, the sprawling company, the vast real estate holdings, the investment portfolios. He showed me financial statements that made my head spin, numbers so enormous they felt like fiction. He gave me contact information for a whole new world of accountants, lawyers, and advisors. It was overwhelming, yes, but something had shifted inside me. I'd learned something truly important in the 5 years since my family threw me away. I was stronger than I thought, smarter than I thought, more capable than anyone had ever given me credit for. And I had something my family didn't have. I had integrity. I had honor. I had the unwavering determination to honor my grandfather's final wishes, no matter what it cost me. When I finally left Theodore's office that afternoon, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the tall, gleaming buildings around me, at the stream of expensive cars passing by, at this vast, complicated world I had just inherited, whether I was ready for it or not. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You're going to regret this," it read. Dad. I deleted it without responding. Then I walked to the bus stop, rode 2 buses back to my apartment in the bad part of town, and made myself a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. Because no matter how much money I had just inherited, I was still me, and I was going to make sure I stayed that way. The lawsuit came 3 days after the will reading, a swift, brutal strike. I was at work at the diner, serving up steaming plates of eggs and bacon because I hadn't quit my job, even though I technically owned $6 billion. Theodore called. "They filed," he said without preamble. "Gregory and Vanessa Parker are contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence. They're asking for the entire estate to be divided equally among all family members." My hand shook as I held the phone, the din of the diner fading into an indistinct hum. What does that mean? It means we're going to court. I've arranged for you to meet with Patricia Adams. She's one of the best estate litigation attorneys in the state. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? "I'm scheduled to work," I said, a flicker of my old defiance. "Madison." His voice was gentle but firm. This is more important. I looked around the diner. Rosie, the owner, was at the register. She'd given me a job when nobody else would. She'd let me take food home when she knew I couldn't afford groceries. She'd been kind when I'd had nobody else. "I'll be there," I said. My loyalty to Rosie was deep, but this was a different battle, one I couldn't fight on the front lines of a diner. The next morning, I met Patricia Adams in Theodore's conference room. She was a tall woman in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an even sharper suit. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I've reviewed the case," she said, spreading documents across the table with swift, precise movements. "Your parents have hired Jameson and Associates. They're expensive and aggressive, which means your parents are serious about this. They're not just making threats, they're going for blood." "Can they win?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "Not if we do our job right. Your grandfather's documentation is excellent, but they're going to make this ugly. They've already started leaking stories to the press." She pulled out her phone and showed me a news headline. "Estranged granddaughter inherits billions while grieving family cut off." The article painted me as a manipulative outsider who'd swooped in to steal my poor grandfather's fortune. It quoted unnamed family sources saying I'd been cut off for drug problems and irresponsible behavior, that I'd only reconciled with my grandfather in his final months when he was weak and vulnerable. Every word was a calculated, vicious lie. "They're trying to destroy your reputation before we even get to court," Patricia explained, her voice calm and analytical. "They want public opinion on their side. We need to counter that, but carefully. Anything you say can be used against you." "What should I do?" "Nothing. Say nothing. Don't talk to reporters. Don't post on social media. Live your life quietly and let us handle the PR through official channels." She looked at me seriously, her gaze piercing. "Can you do that? Can you stay silent while they drag your name through the mud?" I thought about the last 5 years, about being invisible, about keeping my head down and surviving. It was a skill I had mastered. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." "Good. Now, they've also filed for a temporary restraining order to freeze all estate assets until the case is resolved. We have a hearing next week. In the meantime, you can't touch any of the money or make any decisions regarding Montgomery Innovations." My stomach sank again. "How long will the case take?" 6 months minimum, possibly over a year if they appeal. A year of living in my tiny studio apartment while my family tried to take everything away from me. A year of watching my name get destroyed in the media. A year of fighting. "I can do that too," I said, my voice firm. Patricia smiled, a small, approving nod. "Your grandfather said you were tough. I'm starting to see why." The temporary restraining order was granted the following week. I sat in a sterile courtroom, a silent observer, while my parents' lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Jameson, argued that I might liquidate assets or hide money before the trial, that I was a flight risk, that the estate needed protection from me. Patricia countered brilliantly, highlighting that I'd lived in the same apartment for 3 years and worked at the same diner for 4, that I'd made no attempts to access any of the estate funds, that the only protection needed was from the very people contesting the will. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes, granted the restraining order anyway. "It's temporary," Patricia assured me afterward, her hand on my arm. "And it works in our favor, actually. They can't claim you're stealing or mismanaging funds when you're legally barred from touching them." That night, I came home to find Bennett waiting outside my apartment building, a looming, unwelcome shadow in the dim light. "Nice place," he said, surveying the graffiti on the wall, his voice laced with the old, familiar sneer. "Real classy." "What do you want?" "To talk, to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice at that reading." He had the decency to look uncomfortable, shuffling his feet. "Look, Madison, this got out of hand. Mom and Dad are furious, and they're making me testify against you. They're saying I have to say you manipulated Grandpa, or they'll cut me off." "So?" "So I don't want to do it. I don't want to lie in court." "Then don't." "You don't understand. Mom and Dad control everything. My job, my apartment, my car. It's all through their company. If I don't do what they say, I'll end up like you, living in a place like this, working at a diner." "Is that supposed to insult me?" I cut him off, my voice sharp with indignation. "Because I'm not ashamed of where I live or where I work. I earned everything I have. Can you say the same?" Bennett's face flushed, a mottled red spreading across his cheeks. "I didn't come here to fight." Then why did you come? To ask me to share? To give Mom and Dad something so they'll back off? You have $6 billion, Madison. You could give them each $100 million and still be rich. Why not just do it? Why make this a war? I looked at my brother, this stranger who had laughed when they threw me out, who had ignored me for 5 years, who was now standing on my doorstep, asking me to surrender because it was convenient for him. Grandpa Lawrence didn't want them to have his money, I said quietly, each word weighted with his memory. He left them each $1 for a reason, and he put a clause in the will that says if I give them anything more, the entire estate goes to charity. So even if I wanted to give them something, which I don't, I couldn't. That's insane. That's Grandpa protecting me from exactly this conversation, from people like you trying to manipulate me into giving up what's mine. Bennett ran a frustrated hand through his hair. They're going to win, you know. Dad's hired the best lawyers. They have evidence that Grandpa was sick, that he was on medication that affected his judgment. He had a heart condition. That didn't make him incompetent. They have testimony from his doctors. No, they don't. I've seen all the medical records. Every doctor said he was completely sound mentally. Bennett's eyes shifted away, unable to meet my gaze. They'll find something. They always do. And when you lose, you'll have nothing. You'll be back here in this apartment, working at that diner. Except everyone will know you're the girl who tried to steal from her own family. Is that really what you want? I'd rather have nothing and my integrity than billions and be like you. He flinched like I'd hit him. I'm trying to help you, he insisted. No, you're not. You're trying to help yourself. Now get out of here before I call the police. Madison, go. He left. I went inside and locked the door, my hands shaking, but my resolve hardening. That night, I received 7 phone calls from blocked numbers. I didn't answer any of them. Then the calls stopped, and text messages started coming through, a relentless barrage of psychological warfare. You're making a mistake. We're your family. We know what's best for you. Give us what we deserve, or we'll destroy you. Everyone will know what you really are. I blocked every number, but they kept finding new ways to contact me, a constant, insidious reminder of their malice. The next week, a reporter showed up at the diner, a small camera crew trailing behind her. Madison Parker, she said, her voice bright and aggressive. Can you comment on the allegations that you manipulated your grandfather into cutting off his family? Rosie, bless her heart, stepped between us, her stout figure a protective barrier. Get out of my diner, she demanded, her voice firm. The public has a right to know, the reporter insisted, microphone thrust forward. I said get out or I'm calling the cops. Rosie pointed to the door. She's working. She's not answering questions. The reporter left, but she filmed me through the window for another 10 minutes before finally driving away. You okay, honey? Rosie asked, her hand on my shoulder. I'm fine. You want to talk about what's going on? I keep seeing your name in the news. I can't. I'm sorry. My lawyer said not to discuss it with anyone. Rosie patted my hand, her gaze warm and understanding. You're a good girl, Madison. I don't believe a word of what they're saying about you. You keep your head up, you hear me? I almost cried then, because in a world where my own family was trying to destroy me, Rosie, who barely knew me, believed in me anyway. She was a testament to the unexpected kindness that blooms in the harshest environments. The attacks continued for weeks, a relentless media onslaught. More articles appeared, each one worse than the last. Photos of me, looking tired and unglamorous after work, were splashed across tabloids with headlines like, "Alleged fortune hunter shows no remorse." Stories circulated about how I'd been estranged from my family for years due to behavioral problems, anonymous quotes from family friends claiming I'd always been manipulative and greedy. None of it was true, but in the court of public opinion, truth was often irrelevant. My online jewelry business, my small, hard-won triumph, started getting 1-star reviews from fake accounts. Don't buy from this scammer. She stole from her dying grandfather, manipulative and dishonest. I had no choice but to shut down the store. Someone even found my address and published it online. I started getting hate mail, vile, anonymous letters filled with threats and insults. Patricia told me to document everything, which I did, meticulously. But it felt like I was drowning in poison, and nobody was throwing me a rope. Then, 3 months into the brutal legal battle, something changed. Theodore called me late one night, his voice filled with an urgency that pierced through my exhaustion. "We got it." "Got what?" "The evidence your grandfather left us. The safety deposit box, Madison. This changes everything." The safety deposit box was in a bank vault downtown, registered under both Lawrence Montgomery's name and mine. "He added you 6 months before he died," Theodore explained as we waited for the bank manager. "Nobody else knew about it. Not your parents, not Bennett, just you, me, and the bank." The manager, a prim woman with a sympathetic gaze, led us into a private room with a long table. She brought in a metal box about the size of a briefcase and set it down carefully. "Take your time," she said, then left us alone, closing the door softly behind her. Theodore opened the box. Inside were folders, dozens of them, all meticulously labeled and organized. "Your grandfather was meticulous," Theodore said, pulling them out one by one. "He knew exactly what your parents would do, and he prepared for all of it." The first folder was labeled Medical Records. Theodore opened it to reveal comprehensive evaluations from 3 different doctors, all dated within the last year of my grandfather's life. Each one stated clearly, unequivocally, that Lawrence Montgomery was of sound mind, had full mental capacity, understood his decisions, and showed no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. "These directly contradict what your parents' lawyers are claiming," Theodore said, his voice full of quiet satisfaction. The second folder was labeled Financial Records. It contained a detailed accounting of every penny my grandfather had given me over the 5 years since they threw me out. Money orders sent to my P.O. box, receipts from the dinners we'd shared, purchase records from my jewelry business showing he'd bought pieces under different names. The total amount? $47,000 over 5 years. "This proves he was helping you," Theodore explained. "But more importantly, it proves the amounts were reasonable and spread out over time, not large, suspicious transfers that would indicate manipulation." The third folder was labeled Surveillance Records. My stomach turned. Surveillance. "Your grandfather hired a private investigator 3 years ago," Theodore continued, noting my discomfort. "He wanted documentation of what your parents were really like, what they were planning, what they said about him when they thought nobody was listening." Theodore pulled out transcripts of recorded conversations, my parents discussing how to get power of attorney over Lawrence Montgomery, strategies for having him declared incompetent, plans for what they'd do with his company once they had control. There were photos, too. My mother laughing at a lavish party 2 days after my grandfather's funeral. My father meeting with lawyers weeks before. Lawrence died, clearly planning the legal challenge already. "They were planning to contest the will before he even died," I whispered, the realization chilling me to the bone. "Yes, and your grandfather knew it. That's why he documented everything." The fourth folder was labeled Bennett Parker. Inside were emails between Bennett and my parents. In them, Bennett expressed doubts about their plan to contest the will. He said it felt wrong, that maybe Madison deserved the inheritance. My parents' responses were cruel. They called him weak, said he was betraying the family, threatened to cut him off if he didn't cooperate. The final email, dated 2 weeks before the will reading, was from my mother. "You will testify against Madison in court, or you will end up exactly like her, with nothing. Stop being emotional and think about your future. Bennett tried to stand up for you," Theodore said quietly. "They forced him into this." I thought about Bennett showing up at my apartment asking me to share. Maybe he'd been trying to find a way out for both of us, a desperate plea for a truce amidst the impending war. The fifth folder was labeled Madison. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Photos of me walking to work, photos of me at community college, head bent over books. Photos of me in the diner, smiling at customers, a genuine, hard-won smile. Photos of my jewelry displayed in my online store, each piece a tiny act of defiance. Photos of me laughing with Tasha, my true family. My grandfather had been watching me for 5 years, not in a creepy way, but in a fiercely protective way, documenting my life, my struggle, my quiet triumphs. There were notes, too, in his familiar, elegant handwriting. Madison received an A on her business final. So proud. Madison's jewelry business hit $10,000 in sales this month. She did this all on her own. Saw Madison at the diner today. She looked tired but happy. She's surviving. I started crying again, tears of profound gratitude and overwhelming love. "He documented your life," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your achievements, your struggles, your character. He wanted proof that you were exactly who he said you were. A strong, independent young woman who built something from nothing. Someone who deserved his trust." The last item in the box wasn't in a folder. It was a USB drive with a simple label, "For the trial." Theodore plugged it into his laptop. A video file appeared, the same one I'd watched in his office, of my grandfather explaining why he'd left me everything. But there was another file too, a longer one, dated 1 week before he died. Theodore clicked play. My grandfather appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a hospital room. He was in a bed, wearing a hospital gown, hooked up to monitors, but his eyes were clear and sharp, his mind obviously lucid. A doctor stood next to him, a professional, reassuring presence. "Mr. Montgomery," the doctor said, "can you state your full name for the record?" "Lawrence Edward Montgomery." "And do you understand why we're recording this?" "Yes, because my family is going to try to claim I was out of my mind when I made my will, and I want proof that I wasn't." He looked directly at the camera, his gaze unwavering, resolute. "I am of completely sound mind. I understand exactly what I'm doing. I am leaving my entire estate to my granddaughter, Madison Elizabeth Parker, because she is the only person in my family who deserves it." The doctor asked him a series of questions: math problems, memory tests, current events, basic cognitive assessments. My grandfather answered every single one perfectly. "What year is it?" 2024. "Who is the current president?" "Joe Biden." "Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens? 100, 93, 86, 79. He counted flawlessly, his mind sharp as a tack. Then the doctor asked harder questions about his business, about his assets, about the specific details of his will. My grandfather answered everything with precision and clarity. "Why are you leaving your estate to Madison instead of your other family members?" the doctor asked, a note of gentle inquiry in his voice. Lawrence Montgomery's expression hardened, a steely resolve settling over his features. "Because Madison is the only one who ever loved me for who I was. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, married into this family for money and social status. My son-in-law, Gregory, only tolerated me because of what I could do for his career. My grandson, Bennett, was raised to see me as a bank account instead of a person. But Madison," his face softened, a tender, loving expression replacing the hardness, "Madison just wanted to have pancakes with her grandpa. She never asked me for a thing. When her parents threw her out, she built a life for herself instead of crawling back and begging. She's strong, she's kind, she's everything they're not." "And you're certain this is what you want?" "Completely certain. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He looked at the camera again, his eyes locking with mine across time and space. "Madison, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone and they're fighting you. Don't let them win. You deserve this. Use the money to build something good. Help people. Be the person I always knew you were. I love you, sweetheart." The video ended. I sat there, sobbing, completely overwhelmed by the depth of his love, his incredible foresight, his unwavering faith in me. This video, combined with all the other documentation, makes your parents' case impossible to win, Theodore said, his voice quiet, filled with a sense of triumph. "We'll present this in court, and the judge will have no choice but to rule in your favor." "When?" I asked, my voice still thick with tears. "When can we show this?" "The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. We'll file all of this as evidence beforehand, but we'll save the video for the courtroom, maximum impact." "What about my parents? If they know we have this..." "If they know, they'll try to settle. They'll offer you deals. They might even apologize and try to manipulate you into dropping the case. Don't engage. Don't respond. Let your lawyers handle everything." That night, I lay in bed. The images of my grandfather in that hospital bed burned into my mind. Dying, but still fighting for me, still protecting me, still making sure I'd be okay after he was gone. He'd thought of everything, and I wasn't going to let him down. The trial began on a cold morning in December, almost 6 months after my grandfather's death. I wore a simple navy suit that Patricia had helped me pick out. Nothing too expensive, nothing too cheap, professional, but not pretentious. "Remember," Patricia told me as we walked into the courthouse, her voice a calm anchor. "Don't react to anything they say. Stay calm, stay composed. Let me handle the lawyers. When it's your turn to testify, just tell the truth." The courtroom was packed, a sea of curious faces, reporters, and legal professionals. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their formidable legal team. My mother wore all black, like she was still in deep mourning, a theatrical touch. My father wore his usual power suit, an emblem of his unyielding ambition. Bennett sat behind them, looking utterly miserable, his usual arrogance replaced by a palpable discomfort. On our side, it was just Patricia, Theodore, me, and one associate. We didn't need a huge team, we had the truth. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Harrison, called the court to order, her voice resonating with authority. Gerald Jameson, my parents' lawyer, gave his opening statement first, his voice dripping with calculated sympathy. "Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable elderly man who was manipulated by a cunning young woman who saw an opportunity for vast wealth. Lawrence Montgomery was sick. He was on multiple medications. He was isolated from his family in his final months, giving Madison Parker the perfect opportunity to influence him. She preyed on his loneliness and convinced him to disinherit his loving family who had cared for him his entire life. It took everything I had not to react, to maintain my composure, to keep my face a neutral mask." Patricia's opening statement was brief and direct, cutting through Jameson's histrionics. "Your Honor, this case is actually about a family that threw away their daughter and granddaughter when she refused to marry a man 3 times her age. It's about a young woman who built a life from nothing while her family ignored her. And it's about a grandfather who loved his granddaughter enough to ensure she was taken care of after he was gone. The evidence will show that Lawrence Montgomery was of completely sound mind, that he made his decision freely and clearly, and that the only manipulation here is coming from the very people contesting his wishes." The first day of testimony was brutal, a relentless assault on my character and my grandfather's integrity. Gerald Jameson called my grandfather's doctor to the stand, not one of the doctors who'd evaluated him for the will, but his general practitioner who treated him for years. "Dr. Peterson, can you describe Mr. Montgomery's health in his final months? He had a serious heart condition. He was on multiple medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, pain management." "Pain management? You mean painkillers?" Jameson emphasized, implying impairment. "Yes, but at therapeutic doses. Could these medications have affected his cognitive function?" "It's possible. But thank you, doctor." Jameson sat down, a smug look on his face. Patricia stood up for a cross-examination, her voice calm and incisive. "Dr. Peterson, did you ever observe any signs of cognitive decline in Mr. Montgomery?" "No." "Did you ever have concerns about his mental capacity?" "No." "Did he ever seem confused or disoriented in his appointments?" "No, he was always sharp, always knew exactly what was going on." "Thank you, doctor." Patricia's quiet dismantling of Jameson's narrative was masterful. Next, Jameson called a series of character witnesses. People who claimed my grandfather had become isolated and paranoid in his final months, that he'd stopped attending family events, that he'd been withdrawing from people. Patricia dismantled each one on cross-examination. "When was the last time you actually spoke to Mr. Montgomery?" About 3 years ago." 3 years. So you don't actually know what his state of mind was in his final months, do you?" "Well, no, but—" "Thank you." Then Jameson called Bennett to the stand. My brother looked miserable, his face pale, as he was sworn in. "Mr. Parker, can you describe your relationship with your grandfather?" "We were close," Bennett said, his voice cracking, a forced sentimentality. "He was like a father to me." "And were you surprised when you learned he'd left everything to your sister?" "Yes, very surprised." "Why do you think he did that?" Bennett's eyes flicked to me, then quickly away, unable to hold my gaze. I think Madison manipulated him. She started meeting with him secretly. She must have convinced him to change the will." My hands clenched under the table, my nails digging into my palms. "Thank you. No further questions." Jameson looked pleased with himself. Patricia stood up for cross-examination, and her voice was ice, each word a carefully aimed projectile. "Mr. Parker, you testified that you and your grandfather were close. How often did you visit him in his final year?" Bennett shifted uncomfortably in the witness box. "I don't remember exactly." "Let me help your memory. According to visitor logs from the care facility where your grandfather spent his final 3 months, you visited him exactly twice. Your parents visited 3 times. Madison visited 0 times because she was banned from the facility. Does that sound like a close family? "We were busy," Bennett blurted out defensively. "Too busy to visit your dying grandfather, but not too busy to contest his will?" "Objection!" Jameson stood up, his face reddening. "Sustained," Judge Harrison said, her gaze firm. "Rephrase, counselor." Patricia's expression didn't change, her composure unshakable. "Mr. Parker, why did you visit your grandfather so rarely?" I don't know. Work was... Or was it because, as these emails show, your parents told you not to visit him, that they were already planning to contest the will and didn't want documentation of their neglect? Patricia held up printed emails, their contents clearly visible to the jury. Bennett's face went white, draining of all color. These are emails from your mother, dated 6 months before Mr. Montgomery's death, instructing you and your father to minimize contact with him. Quote, "We need to establish that he was isolated so we can claim Madison influenced him. Don't visit too often." Did you receive these emails, Mr. Parker? "Yes," Bennett whispered, his voice barely audible, defeated. "So, your mother told you to neglect your grandfather specifically to build a legal case against your sister?" Yes." The courtroom erupted in whispers, a ripple of shock and outrage. "No further questions," Patricia said, a quiet triumph in her voice. My parents' faces were bright red, a mixture of fury and humiliation. The trial continued for 3 more days, a grueling parade of witnesses, more evidence, and more lies from my parents' side that Patricia systematically destroyed. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I was terrified. Patricia had prepared me, had drilled me relentlessly, but actually sitting in that witness box with everyone staring at me, their gazes dissecting my very soul, was overwhelming. Jameson tried to break me. "Miss Parker, isn't it true that you were estranged from your family for 5 years?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that during those 5 years you worked multiple low-wage jobs and lived in poverty?"
"Yes."
"And then suddenly your wealthy grandfather dies and leaves you $6 billion. Quite convenient, isn't it?" "It wasn't convenient. It was tragic. I loved my grandfather, and I wish he was still alive." My voice trembled, but I held his gaze. "But you can't deny that you benefited from his death." "I would trade every penny to have him back." "How touching. Tell me, Miss Parker, how often did you meet with your grandfather in his final months?" "I couldn't meet with him. My family banned me from visiting." "How convenient that there are no witnesses to verify that." "Actually," Patricia interrupted, standing up, her voice sharp, "we have documentation of the banned visitor list from the care facility. Madison's name is on it. Would you like to see it?" Jameson's jaw tightened, defeated. "Miss Parker, you claim you loved your grandfather, yet you accepted $6 billion from him. Don't you think that's excessive?" "I didn't ask for it. He chose to leave it to me." "Why do you think he did that?" "Because he loved me. Because he knew I'd honor his wishes and use the money to help people instead of just enriching myself." "And what makes you think you're better than your family?" He sneered, a final cutting remark. I looked directly at my parents for the first time since the trial started, my voice clear and unwavering, empowered by all I had endured. Because I never threw anyone away for refusing to do what I wanted. Because I never cut off my family for having different dreams than me. Because I built something on my own instead of living off someone else's accomplishments. That's what makes me different. My mother's face twisted with pure, unadulterated rage. After 3 grueling hours of testimony, Patricia stood up for redirect, a final, elegant counterattack. "Madison, why did your parents throw you out when you were 18? "Because I refused to marry a 45-year-old man they wanted me to marry for business reasons. And in the 5 years since then, how often have they tried to contact you?" "Never, until my grandfather died." "Did you ever ask your grandfather for money or help?" "No." "Did you even know he was wealthy when you first started meeting with him after you left home?" "I knew he had money, but I didn't know the extent of it. I never asked about it. I just wanted to see my grandpa." "Thank you, Madison." I stepped down from the witness box, my legs shaking, but a profound sense of relief washing over me. The hardest part was done. The final piece of evidence was the video. Patricia played both videos for the court, the one explaining why my grandfather left me everything, and the medical evaluation proving his sound mind, his unwavering lucidity. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on the screen, every ear attuned to my grandfather's voice, his powerful words cutting through the carefully constructed lies. When the video ended, Judge Harrison looked at my parents with barely concealed disgust. "I'll hear closing arguments now," she said, her voice stern. Jameson tried his best, but his closing argument was weak, hollow. Everything he claimed had been disproven. Every witness he'd called had been dismantled by Patricia's meticulous cross-examination. Patricia's closing argument was simple, elegant, and devastatingly effective. "Your Honor, Lawrence Montgomery was a brilliant man who made a clear, informed, and legally sound decision about his own estate. His family doesn't like that decision, but that doesn't make it invalid. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that Mr. Montgomery was of sound mind and that Madison Parker is the rightful heir to his estate. We ask that you uphold his wishes and dismiss this frivolous lawsuit." Judge Harrison didn't even take a recess. "I've heard enough," she said, her gaze firm, unyielding. "This case is dismissed. The will stands as written. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees and court costs to the defendant. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, you should be ashamed of yourselves for bringing this case." She banged her gavel, a final resounding declaration. It was over. I had won. The media reaction was immediate, explosive. Within hours of the verdict, every news outlet was running the story. "Judge rules against parents who threw out teen daughter." The videos from the trial went viral. My grandfather's heartfelt words, Bennett's reluctant testimony about the damning emails, my parents' faces contorted in fury and disbelief when the judge ruled against them. Public opinion shifted overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the manipulative gold digger. I was the brave young woman who'd overcome family betrayal and honored her grandfather's final wishes. My parents were destroyed in the court of public opinion. Articles appeared detailing how they tried to force me into an arranged marriage, how they'd thrown me out with nothing, how they banned me from seeing my dying grandfather, and then tried to steal his fortune. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments, a digital mob turning on them. Their businesses started losing clients, a domino effect of public condemnation. People they called friends suddenly stopped taking their calls. But the real reckoning came from somewhere I didn't expect. A final, devastating blow delivered from beyond the grave. 2 weeks after the verdict, Theodore called me, his voice carrying a grim satisfaction. "The IRS is investigating your parents," he said. "Your grandfather filed a report before he died. Tax fraud, money laundering, some other financial crimes. They've been hiding income from Montgomery Innovations for years." Grandpa reported them. He had documented everything. He'd been collecting evidence for the last 5 years, meticulously building a case against them, a secret weapon against their greed. He gave it all to the IRS 6 months before he died, ensuring that even if he couldn't openly protect me in life, he would ensure justice in his death. My grandfather hadn't just protected me. He'd made sure my parents would face the full consequences for their behavior. Within a month, federal charges were filed. Gregory and Vanessa Parker were arrested on 12 counts of tax evasion and fraud. The total amount they'd hidden from the government was over $15 million. Their mansion was seized. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their company went into bankruptcy, crumbling under the weight of their deceit. Everything they'd built, or rather, everything they'd taken from others, dissolved into nothing. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction. I just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that my own parents had been so consumed by greed, so utterly devoid of love, that they ultimately destroyed themselves. Bennett called me a week after his parents were arrested, his voice thin, hesitant. "Can we talk?" he asked. "In person?" I agreed. I met him at a coffee shop in a neutral part of town, a place far removed from our opulent past or my humble present. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple, worn shirt and jeans. He wasn't the arrogant, privileged man who'd sat in Theodore's office sneering at me. He looked utterly broken, stripped bare of all his former defenses. "I'm sorry," he said before I could even sit down, his voice raw with a pain I recognized. "I'm so sorry, Madison, for everything. For laughing when they threw you out. For ignoring you for 5 years. For testifying against you. For being a terrible brother." I sat down across from him, my heart a complex tangle of emotions. "Why are you apologizing now?" Because I lost everything, and I finally understand what you went through, he confessed, his eyes once so dismissive, now filled with a raw, honest vulnerability. I have nothing. No money, no job, no home. Mom and Dad are in jail, and I'm living in a motel room, working at a grocery store, just trying to survive. And I realized this is what you did for 5 years. Except you did it without complaining, without asking anyone for help. You just built a life for yourself. What do you want from me, Bennett? I asked, needing clarity, needing to protect myself. Nothing. I swear nothing. I don't want money or help or anything. I just wanted to apologize, to tell you that you were right about everything, and that I'm ashamed of who I was. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table, his hand trembling slightly. What's this? A letter I should have sent you 5 years ago. I wrote it the night they threw you out. I was going to mail it to you, but Mom found it and ripped it up. This is a new copy. I rewrote it from memory. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the familiar loops and angles of his handwriting both foreign and deeply familiar. Dear Madison, I'm sorry I didn't stop them. I'm sorry I laughed. I'm sorry I'm such a coward. You were right to refuse to marry Richard. You were right to stand up for yourself. I wish I was as brave as you. I hope you're okay wherever you are. I hope you build an amazing life, and I hope someday you can forgive me. Love, Bennett. My eyes burned with tears, a mix of old pain and new understanding. You wrote this 5 years ago? Yeah, he said, wiping his eyes, and I've regretted not sending it every day since. I know it's too late. I know you probably hate me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of you, and that you deserved every penny Grandpa left you. We sat in silence for a long moment, the quiet speaking volumes. What are you going to do now? I asked finally, a flicker of genuine curiosity in my voice. Keep working. Keep living. Try to be a better person than I was. I'm in therapy now, trying to figure out who I am without Mom and Dad controlling everything. It's hard, but it feels right. Good, I said, a small, genuine smile forming on my lips. That's good. Madison, do you think? I mean, I don't expect anything, but do you think maybe someday we could be siblings again? Not right now. I know I have to earn that, but maybe eventually. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the cruel stranger who'd sneered at me in Theodore's office, but the scared little boy who'd been raised by parents who taught him to value money over people. Maybe, I thought, maybe there was hope for him, for us, after all. Maybe, I said, carefully. If you keep going to therapy, if you keep trying to be better, if you prove that you're serious about changing. I will, I promise. He sounded desperate, earnest. I stood up to leave. Madison, Bennett called after me, his voice still tinged with vulnerability. Thank you for not completely shutting me out. I don't deserve it, but thank you. I nodded and walked out. I didn't know if Bennett and I would ever have a real relationship again, but at least he was trying. At least he'd apologized. That was more than my parents would ever do. My mother and father went to trial 6 months later. They were both convicted and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. I didn't go to their sentencing. I didn't send them letters. I didn't visit. I was done. They'd had years to be my parents, and they'd chosen money over me every single time. Now they could live with the consequences of those choices. The day after their sentencing, I stood in the office of Montgomery Innovations, my office now, and looked out at the bustling city below. I'd spent the last 6 months immersing myself in the intricate workings of the company my grandfather built, the innovative technology divisions, the sprawling real estate holdings, the diversified investment portfolios, the charitable foundations he'd established. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But I wasn't doing it alone. I'd assembled a team of advisors who actually cared about the company's mission, not just its profits. I'd promoted people from within, talented individuals who'd been overlooked by previous management. I'd started initiatives to help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get into technology careers, a way of giving back, of building bridges to opportunity. I was building something that would make my grandfather proud, and I was doing it my way. 6 months after winning the trial, I stood on the stage of a beautifully renovated community center in the poorest neighborhood in the city, the very same neighborhood where I'd lived when I had nothing. The building had been purchased with Montgomery Foundation money, renovated with Montgomery Foundation money, staffed with people hired through Montgomery Foundation jobs programs. And now, it was opening its doors to provide free technology education, job training, and support services to anyone who needed it. I'd named it the Lawrence Montgomery Center for Opportunity. The room was packed. Press, community members, local politicians, and a throng of eager kids from the neighborhood who'd signed up for our very first coding class. I stepped up to the microphone, nervous, despite having practiced my speech 100 times. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I'm Madison Parker, and I'm honored to welcome you to the Lawrence Montgomery Center. This building represents something my grandfather believed deeply, that everyone deserves a chance. Not handouts, not charity, but opportunity." I looked out at the crowd and saw faces of all colors, all ages, all backgrounds. 5 years ago, I was thrown out of my family's home with 1 suitcase and $300. I worked 3 jobs while going to community college. I lived in an apartment with bars on the windows in a neighborhood where I heard gunshots at night. I know what it's like to be written off, to be told you're not good enough, to have people assume you'll fail. The room was silent, a collective intake of breath. But I also know what it's like to have one person believe in you. My grandfather, Lawrence Montgomery, believed in me when nobody else did. He didn't give me money or connections or special treatment. He gave me something more valuable. He gave me his time, his attention, his belief that I could build something meaningful. I gestured to the vibrant, bustling building around us. This center is my way of passing that gift forward. We're offering free coding classes, business training, job placement services, mentorship programs, and scholarships. We're not just teaching skills. We're building a community of people who lift each other up, who believe in potential instead of privilege. I pulled out a photo of my grandfather and held it up, his smiling face looking out at the hopeful crowd. "Grandpa, I hope I'm making you proud. This is for you, and for everyone who's ever been told they don't deserve a chance." The applause was thunderous, a wave of genuine enthusiasm and hope. After the ceremony, I walked through the center's classrooms, meeting the kids who'd enrolled in our first programs. Teenagers from foster care, single mothers trying to learn new skills, formerly incarcerated people looking for a fresh start. People like I'd been, people who just needed someone to believe in them. One girl, maybe 16, approached me shyly, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and hope. "Miss Parker, I just wanted to say thank you." "Of course," I replied, my heart swelling. "I'm in the foster system, and nobody ever thought I'd amount to anything, but I love computers, and now I get to learn coding for free. This program might change my life." I saw myself in her eyes, the same spark of determination, the same yearning for a future. "What's your name?" I asked. "Destiny. Destiny," I repeated, a smile forming. "You're going to do amazing things, I know it, and if you ever need help or advice or just someone to talk to, you can reach me directly." I handed her my card. "I mean that." She started crying, overwhelmed, and hugged me. I hugged her back, thinking about how much I'd needed a hug like this 5 years ago, and how nobody had been there to give it to me. Now, I could be that person for someone else. That evening, I had dinner with Tasha, my best friend, the woman who'd let me sleep on her couch when I had nowhere else to go. "Girl, I am so proud of you," she said, raising her glass, her eyes shining with genuine affection. "From my couch to billionaire philanthropist, you're living proof that good things happen to good people." "I got lucky," I started, about to mention Grandpa Lawrence's inheritance. "Stop!" She cut me off, her gaze firm. "Yes, he left you money, but you earned it by being a good person, by working your tail off, by staying kind when the world was cruel. This isn't luck, Madison. This is karma finally working right." I clinked my glass against hers, a silent toast to resilience and true friendship. "Thank you for everything you did for me. I wouldn't have survived without you." "That's what real family does," she said simply. "And speaking of family," she grinned, her eyes sparkling, "how's the cute teacher you've been volunteering with at the center?" I felt my face get hot. "Jordan? We're just friends." Friends who make googly eyes at each other constantly. Jordan Hayes taught at a public school in a low-income neighborhood. I'd met him 3 months ago when he brought a group of his students to tour the center. He was passionate about education, funny, kind, and completely uninterested in my money. We'd been volunteering together every Saturday, teaching coding to kids, and yes, maybe I had developed feelings for him. He asked me out, I admitted, a blush spreading across my cheeks. Tasha squealed, delighted. And I said yes. We're going to dinner next week. Finally, you deserve some happiness, girl, some romance, someone who loves you for you. That night, lying in my new apartment, not a mansion, just a nice, normal two-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood, I thought about everything that had changed in one short year. I'd gone from having nothing to having everything. But the real wealth wasn't the money. It was the freedom to help people, to build something meaningful, to honor my grandfather's memory by being the person he always believed I could be. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Looking forward to Saturday. Want to grab coffee before we teach? I smiled and typed back, yes, I'd like that. Another text came through, this one from Bennett. Finished my 3rd month of therapy, got a promotion at work. Small steps. Thanks for believing in me. I responded simply, proud of you. Then one more text from an unknown number. This is Destiny from the center. I just wrote my first program. Thank you for giving me this chance. I saved her number and sent back, that's amazing. Keep it up. You're going to do great things. I fell asleep that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. 1 year later, I stood in the same office at Montgomery Innovations where I'd stood after my parents' conviction. But this time, I wasn't alone. Jordan stood beside me, his hand warm and comforting in mine. We'd been dating for 10 months, and he made me laugh every single day. He'd never asked me for anything, never cared about the money. He just loved me. Messy, complicated, sometimes scared me. Ready for the board meeting? He asked, his smile infectious. Ready as I'll ever be. I had just proposed a new initiative to the board, expanding the Lawrence Montgomery Foundation to 10 more cities, building 10 more centers, helping thousands more kids. The board had approved it unanimously. My phone rang. It was Theodore. Madison, I have news. Oh? Remember that tech startup you invested in? The one developing accessible technology for disabled students? Yes, I felt a surge of excitement. They just got acquired. Your $20 million investment is now worth $200 million. I sat down, stunned. $200 million. What should we do with it? Theodore asked. I didn't even have to think. Put it into the foundation, expand the scholarship program, fund more centers. You sure that's a lot of personal money? I'm sure. Grandpa didn't leave me this money to hoard it. He left it to me to use it. So that's what I'm doing. After I hung up, Jordan kissed my forehead, his touch grounding me. Your grandfather would be so proud of you. I hope so. That evening, I visited my grandfather's grave for the first time since his funeral. I brought pancakes. I sat on the damp grass next to his headstone and opened the container. Hi, Grandpa, I said, a soft smile on my face. I know this is weird, but we always had pancakes together, so I brought some. I set one pancake on the grass next to his headstone. A lot has happened since you left. Mom and Dad are in prison. Bennett's in therapy and actually trying to be a better person. I won the case, obviously, and I've been running your company and your foundation. I took a bite of my pancake, the familiar taste a comforting reminder of our shared past. I opened the first Lawrence Montgomery Center. It's beautiful, Grandpa. Kids are learning and growing and getting chances they never would have had otherwise. I'm opening 9 more centers this year, helping thousands of kids. The wind rustled gently through the trees above me, a soft, approving sigh. I met someone. His name is Jordan. He's a teacher. He's kind and funny, and he doesn't care about the money. He just loves me. I think you'd like him. I finished my pancake and stood up, feeling a sense of closure, of purpose. I miss you every day, but I'm doing okay. Better than okay. I'm happy. I'm building something meaningful. I'm helping people, just like you wanted. I pressed my hand to his headstone, a silent promise. Thank you for everything, for believing in me, for protecting me, for giving me the chance to do something good with your legacy. I won't let you down, I promise. As I walked back to my car, the sun was setting over the city, bathing everything in a golden light, bright and clear and beautiful. I thought about the girl I'd been 5 years ago, standing outside my family's mansion with one suitcase, terrified, and utterly alone. I thought about the woman I was now, standing on top of the world, with the power to change lives, to build a future. And I thought about my grandfather, who'd seen something in me that nobody else had, who'd loved me unconditionally, who'd given me not just money, but something far more valuable, the belief that I was worthy. I'd taken that belief, that precious gift, and built a legacy. Not a legacy of wealth, a legacy of love. The true lesson here for all of us is not about the inheritance of billions, but the inheritance of self-worth. It's about understanding that true family isn't defined by blood, but by belief, by unwavering support, by those who see your potential when others only see your flaws. It's about having the courage to walk away from what diminishes you and the resilience to build a life that truly reflects who you are. And once you've done that, once you've found your own strength and purpose, the greatest reward is using that power, whatever its form, to lift others up, to create opportunities, and to leave behind a legacy of genuine, impactful love. That, my friends, is a fortune far more valuable than any sum of money.